I will never forget the look on Elaine's face when she held up my phone that night. 6 years of marriage and I had never seen such a mixture of rage, disgust, and heartbreak in her eyes. The message from Dr. Rayburn was still displayed on the screen. "Last night was amazing. We should do it again." My hands trembled as I tried to explain what really happened, that I had been drugged and assaulted. But Elaine just shook her head and said the words that shattered my world: "Stop lying. Men cannot be sexually assaulted by women. You are just making excuses." Before I share how my life fell apart and what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe survivors deserve to be heard, and subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's darkest moments. To understand how my world collapsed, I need to take you back to the beginning. Elaine and I met during my first year as an administrative manager at Memorial Hospital in Portland. She was a dedicated ICU nurse with an infectious laugh and the most compassionate heart I had ever encountered. Our first date was in the hospital cafeteria, sharing a sad excuse for a lunch while discussing healthcare reform. Not exactly romantic, but we were inseparable after that. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony by the Oregon coast, surrounded by family and close friends. Our life together was comfortable and filled with plans. We had just bought our first home, a modest 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood. The extra bedrooms were meant for the children we planned to have. Elaine had even started taking prenatal vitamins in preparation. Everything was falling into place exactly as we had hoped. I enjoyed my job at the hospital. As an administrative manager, I oversaw budget allocations, staffing schedules, and facility management for multiple departments. It was challenging work, but rewarding. I felt like I was contributing to patient care in my own way by making sure the doctors and nurses had everything they needed to do their jobs effectively. Dr. Monica Rayburn joined Memorial Hospital about 4 years into my tenure there. She was a renowned gynecologist who had published several papers on innovative surgical techniques. The hospital administration was thrilled to have her on staff and made it clear that keeping her happy was a priority. As the administrative manager who would be working closely with her department, I was assigned to help her transition. Our relationship was strictly professional at first. Dr. Rayburn was demanding but polite. She had exacting standards and was not afraid to point out inefficiencies in the system. I respected her work ethic and expertise, even when her requests created extra work for my team. What I did not recognize at the time were the subtle warning signs that something was not right with her boundaries. She began texting me outside of work hours with questions that could have easily waited until morning. She would find reasons to schedule meetings with just the two of us present. There were casual touches on my arm or shoulder that lingered a bit too long. I dismissed these moments, telling myself I was overreacting or misinterpreting her professional friendliness. Around this time, the hospital announced a major grant opportunity that could fund a new women's health wing. Dr. Rayburn was the natural choice to lead the medical aspects of the proposal, and I was assigned to handle the administrative and budgetary components. This meant long hours, working closely together, often staying at the hospital well past normal business hours. The late nights started to create tension at home. Elaine would be asleep by the time I got home, and I would leave before she woke up. Our conversations became brief exchanges of information rather than meaningful discussions. When she asked about work, I would complain about the stress, but never mentioned my discomfort with Dr. Rayburn. I did not want to sound unprofessional or paranoid. "You seem different lately," Elaine said one night as we picked at a takeout dinner. "Is something wrong? Just tired," I replied, avoiding her gaze. "This grant proposal is taking everything out of me." "Maybe you should tell them you need help," she suggested. "You have been working with Dr. Rayburn every night for weeks now. The deadline is coming up soon," I said. "It will be over in a couple of weeks, and then things will go back to normal." But things would never go back to normal. I just did not know it yet. The night that changed everything was supposed to be just another late work session. The grant proposal deadline was 3 days away, and Dr. Rayburn insisted we stay to finalize the budget projections. The hospital was quiet. Most of the administrative staff had gone home hours earlier. We were working in her private office, rather than the conference room we usually used. "We have been at this for hours," Dr. Rayburn said, around 9 in the evening. "We deserve a break." She pulled a bottle of expensive whiskey from her desk drawer and 2 glasses. I hesitated when she offered me a drink. I rarely drank hard liquor, and never at work, but she was insistent. "Come on, Chapman. One drink to celebrate how close we are to finishing this proposal. I will not take no for an answer." Not wanting to offend her, I accepted the glass. The whiskey burned going down, but I admitted it helped ease the tension in my shoulders. When she offered a second glass, I reluctantly agreed. By the third drink, I was feeling strangely disoriented. The room seemed to tilt, and my thoughts became foggy. This was not a normal reaction to alcohol. I remember trying to stand, saying I needed to go home, but my legs would not cooperate. "You are in no condition to drive, Dr. Rayburn," said, her voice sounding distant. "Why not rest on my office couch for a bit?" The next few hours exist in my memory as disjointed fragments. I remember her hands on my face, my inability to move my limbs properly, the ceiling spinning above me. I remember trying to say no, but the words came out slurred and weak. I remember waking up periodically, in a state of confusion, unable to fully comprehend what was happening to my body. And I remember the shame and disgust that washed over me when I finally regained enough awareness to understand. I woke up around 3 in the morning, my clothes disheveled, my body sore, and my mind racing with confusion and horror. Dr. Rayburn was sitting at her desk, calmly reviewing documents as if nothing had happened. "You should probably head home now," she said without looking up. "Your wife must be worried." I struggled to my feet, trying to process what had occurred. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She finally looked at me, her expression coldly professional. "We had a nice time, that is all. I would appreciate your discretion about our personal relationship. It would be unfortunate if the grant committee heard rumors about impropriety right before they make their decision." The threat was clear. If I said anything, she would claim it was consensual, or worse, that I had initiated it. Who would believe my version of events over hers? She was a respected doctor, and I was just an administrator. The power imbalance was overwhelming. I somehow managed to drive home in a daze. Elaine was asleep when I arrived, and I went straight to the shower, turning the water as hot as I could stand. I scrubbed my skin until it was raw, but I could not wash away the violation I had experienced. I spent the rest of the night sitting in our guest bathroom, unable to sleep, unable to cry, unable to make sense of what had happened. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and avoidance. I called in sick the next day, claiming food poisoning. When I eventually returned to work, I made excuses to avoid being alone with Dr. Rayburn. I delegated tasks that would have required direct interaction with her, but the damage was already done, both to my sense of self and to my marriage. I began experiencing symptoms I would later recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. Nightmares jolted me awake in cold sweats. Sudden panic attacks struck when I encountered situations that reminded me of that night. I flinched when people touched me unexpectedly. My appetite disappeared and I lost weight rapidly. The most devastating impact was on my relationship with Elaine. I could not bear physical intimacy, recoiling from her touch without being able to explain why. How could I tell her what happened when I barely understood it myself? The shame was overwhelming. Men were not supposed to be victims, especially not of female perpetrators. I had never heard of such a thing happening, which made me feel even more isolated and confused. Elaine noticed the changes, of course. She attributed my withdrawal to stress at first, but as weeks passed, with no improvement, her concern turned to suspicion. She began checking my phone when I was in the shower, looking at my email when I left my laptop open. I knew what she was looking for, but I could not bring myself to tell her the truth. The text message from Dr. Rayburn that finally exposed everything came a month after the assault. "Last night was amazing. We should do it again." She had sent it deliberately, knowing Elaine might see it. It was another demonstration of her power over me, her ability to destroy the one thing I valued most. The night Elaine found that message was the beginning of the end of our marriage. We were sitting in the living room, me pretending to read while actually staring blankly at the same page for 20 minutes, her scrolling through her phone with unusual intensity. The silence between us had become our normal state, but this silence felt different, charged with something dangerous. "Who is Dr. Rayburn?" she asked, suddenly, her voice too calm. My heart stopped. "A doctor at the hospital. The one I have been working on the grant with." She held up my phone, displaying the message. "And is this the kind of work you have been doing?" "Elaine, it is not what you think." I started, my voice shaking. "Something happened, but not what you think." "Really?" "Because what I think is that you have been having an affair with this woman and using your long work hours as cover." I took a deep breath and did the hardest thing I had ever done. I told her the truth. I explained about the whiskey, How strange I had felt my suspicion that I had been drugged. I described waking up, disoriented the gaps in my memory, the feeling of violation. I told her about Dr. Rayburn's veiled threats. When I finished, Elaine was silent, studying my face with an expression I could not read. Then she laughed, a short, bitter sound that cut me to the core. "That is the most pathetic excuse I have ever heard," she said. "Men cannot be sexually assaulted by women. That is not physically possible. Just admit you cheated instead of making up this ridiculous story." Her disbelief was like a second assault. I had finally gathered the courage to speak the unspeakable, and she dismissed it completely. I tried to explain that male victims of female perpetrators existed, that it was a real but underreported problem, but she was not listening anymore. "I want you out of this house," she said finally. "Tonight, go stay with a friend, or at a hotel, I do not care. I cannot even look at you right now." I packed a bag in a daze, moving on autopilot. Before I left, I tried one more time. "Elaine, please. I would never cheat on you. I love you. What I told you is the truth." She turned away from me. "Just go, Chapman." The next few weeks were a blur of couch surfing and cheap hotel rooms. I told my friends that Elaine and I were having problems, but did not elaborate. Most assumed I had done something wrong and kept their distance. A few tried to mediate, but Elaine had already told them her version of events. I was a cheater trying to cover my tracks with an outlandish story. My parents called after hearing from Elaine's mother. "Whatever you did, son, just apologize and fix it," my father advised, assuming my guilt without question. Even my sister, usually my strongest ally, seemed skeptical when I tried to explain what really happened. Work became unbearable. Dr. Rayburn moved through the hospital with complete confidence, occasionally giving me small smiles when we passed in the hallway. She knew she had won. Who would believe my accusation against someone of her stature? I considered reporting her to hospital administration, but imagined how that conversation would go. A man claiming sexual assault by a female superior with no evidence a month after the fact. I would be laughed out of the office. My mental health deteriorated rapidly. I lost more weight. I could not sleep without nightmares. I began having thoughts of ending my life, seeing no way out of the nightmare my existence had become. I had lost my wife, my home, my reputation, and my sense of safety, all in one terrible night. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was sitting in a coffee shop staring into a cold cup I had not touched when I overheard two men at the next table talking about a support group. One was encouraging the other to attend. "It helped me deal with my assault," he said. "Being around other men who understand, who do not judge it, makes all the difference." I found myself following the man out of the coffee shop and awkwardly introducing myself. His name was Patrick, a former police officer who now ran a support group for male survivors of sexual assault. When I haltingly explained my situation, he nodded with understanding, not a trace of disbelief on his face. "It happens more than people realize," he told me. "And the reactions you got from your wife and others, those are common too. But that does not make what happened to you any less real or traumatic." That first conversation with Patrick saved my life. He invited me to attend a group meeting that evening, and for the first time since the assault, I felt a glimmer of hope. Here were men from all walks of life who had experienced what I had, who faced the same disbelief and dismissal, who struggled with the same feelings of shame and confusion. Their stories were different from mine in the details, but identical in the impact. I was not alone anymore. Patrick became more than just the group facilitator. He became my mentor and advisor. When I told him about Dr. Rayburn, he did not hesitate. "You need to report this," he said firmly. "Not just for yourself, but because predators rarely stop at one victim. She has probably done this before, and she will do it again if not stopped." "No one will believe me," I protested. "I have no proof." "You might have more than you think," he countered. "And as a former cop, I can tell you that investigations often uncover evidence the victim did not even know existed." With Patrick's encouragement, I began gathering what evidence I could. I requested security footage from the hospital parking lot, showing when I arrived and left that night. I obtained my credit card statement showing no charges at bars or restaurants, contradicting any claim I might have been drunk from voluntary consumption elsewhere. I documented the rapid weight loss and anxiety symptoms with my primary care doctor, creating a medical record of my deterioration after the assault date. Most crucially, I saved additional text messages from Dr. Rayburn that, while not explicitly admitting assault, showed a pattern of inappropriate communication and implied threats about my job security. Each piece of evidence was small on its own, but together they formed a compelling timeline that supported my account. The day I walked into the police station to file a report was the hardest day of my life. The male officer who took my initial statement was visibly skeptical, asking questions that implied doubt. Had you been flirting with her previously? Why did you accept drinks in her office? Why did you wait so long to report this? I was about to give up when a female detective named Thompson intervened. She took over the interview, her approach completely different. She asked detailed factual questions without judgment. She explained the process of investigation and what I could expect. Most importantly, she believed me, or at least treated my report with the same seriousness she would give any victim. Sexual assault cases are difficult to prosecute even under the best circumstances, Detective Thompson told me honestly. But that does not mean we will not try. And sometimes when one victim comes forward, others find the courage to do the same. Her words proved prophetic. As the investigation progressed, 2 other men who worked at the hospital came forward with similar accounts involving Dr. Rayburn. One was a pharmaceutical representative who had woken up in her hotel room during a medical conference with no memory of how he got there. Another was a medical resident who had been promised a recommendation for a prestigious fellowship in exchange for sexual favors. Like me, both had been too ashamed and afraid to report the incidents when they occurred. The hospital administration initially tried to handle the situation quietly, offering me a generous severance package in exchange for dropping the complaint. When I refused, supported by Patrick and the other victims, they began pressuring me in other ways. My performance was suddenly under scrutiny. Colleagues were distant, unsure which side to take. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to resign, knowing I could never work there again regardless of the investigation's outcome. I moved to a smaller apartment in a different part of town and focused all my energy on the case. Patrick helped me find a job at a non-profit organization that provided resources to trauma survivors. The work was less prestigious than my hospital position but gave me purpose during the darkest period of my life. And unexpectedly, it provided me with valuable insights into my own recovery process. When Detective Thompson called to inform me that the district attorney had decided to file charges against Dr. Rayburn, I broke down in tears. Someone in authority had looked at the evidence and found my account credible enough to pursue justice. It was the first official validation I had received, and it meant more than I could express. The trial began 18 months after the assault. By then, my life had taken on a new shape. I was divorced from Elaine, who had filed the papers after 6 months of separation. I had not spoken to her since signing the final documents. I was still working at the nonprofit and had started taking classes toward a degree in counseling. The support group remained my anchor, and I had begun helping Patrick facilitate sessions for newer members. Walking into the courtroom that first day was surreal. Dr. Rayburn sat at the defense table, immaculately dressed and composed. She did not look like a predator. She looked like a respected professional who had been wrongfully accused, which was exactly the image her high-priced attorney intended to project. The prosecution presented our cases chronologically, starting with the pharmaceutical representative, then the medical resident, and finally me. Each of us endured brutal cross-examination. The defense attorney questioned every detail, looking for inconsistencies. He insinuated that we were colluding to bring down a successful woman out of jealousy or for financial gain. When my turn on the stand came, I focused on Detective Thompson's face in the gallery, drawing strength from her calm presence. I recounted the events as clearly as I could, describing the disorientation I felt after the drinks, the fragmented memories of the assault, and the threatening behavior that followed. The defense attorney tried to portray me as a failing employee, attempting to blame my superior for my own inadequacies, a husband inventing an outlandish story to cover an affair. The turning point in the trial came when the prosecution presented evidence that had been discovered during the investigation. A search of Dr. Rayburn's office had uncovered a prescription sedative that matched the description of symptoms all 3 victims had experienced. Her computer contained research on the drug's effects when combined with alcohol. Most damning of all, a former nurse came forward to testify that she had witnessed Dr. Rayburn adding something to a drink before giving it to a male colleague at a hospital function. The security footage from the hospital parking lot showed me entering the building steady on my feet at 7 in the evening and being practically carried to my car by Dr. Rayburn at 3 in the morning. The timestamp aligned perfectly with my account. Additional testimony from a toxicologist explained how the particular sedative found in Dr. Rayburn's possession would metabolize quickly, leaving little trace after 12 hours, which explained why testing would have been ineffective by the time I reported the assault. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on multiple counts of sexual assault. Dr. Rayburn's face remained impassive as the verdict was read, but I saw her hands trembling slightly. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10. I felt no triumph as I left the courthouse, just a profound exhaustion and a tentative sense of closure. Justice had been served, but it could not undo the damage to my life, my marriage, or my sense of self. Still, knowing that Dr. Rayburn would not be able to hurt others gave me some peace. The media coverage of the trial was mixed. Some outlets focused on the rarity of a female perpetrator being convicted of assaulting male victims, treating the case as an important precedent. Others questioned whether men could truly be victimized in the way we described, perpetuating the same myths that had caused so many people in my life to doubt my experience. In response to the public discourse around the case, I made the decision to speak openly about my experience. I gave interviews, participated in documentaries about male sexual assault survivors, and eventually started a website providing resources and support for men in similar situations. What had begun as the worst experience of my life gradually transformed into a calling, a way to ensure that other men would not face the isolation and disbelief that I had. Almost exactly 1 year after the trial concluded, I received an email from Elaine. I had not heard from her since the divorce was finalized, though I knew from mutual friends that she had followed the trial through news reports. Her message was brief: "Can we meet? There are things I need to say to you in person." I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, that neither of us had frequented during our marriage. When I arrived, she was already there, looking much the same as I remembered, but with a tension in her posture that was new. The moment she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "I am so sorry," she said before I had even sat down. "I should have believed you." We spent 3 hours in that coffee shop. Elaine explained that she had watched every day of the trial via livestream, had read all the evidence that became public record, had seen the testimonies of the other victims. She described her growing horror as she realized that what I had told her that night was the absolute truth, and that her disbelief had caused me additional trauma at the time I needed support most. "I failed you completely," she said, wiping away tears. "When you needed me to be your safe place, I became another source of pain. I do not expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I understand now, and I will regret my reaction for the rest of my life." I had imagined this conversation many times over the past 2 years. In some versions, I was coldly dismissive of her apology. In others, I broke down and told her how much her disbelief had hurt me. The reality was somewhere in between. I felt anger, yes, but also a surprising sense of compassion for her. She had been operating under societal misconceptions that were deeply ingrained. "I spent a lot of time being angry with you," I admitted. "But I have also come to understand that your reaction was shaped by the same cultural myths that made it hard for me to recognize what happened to me in the first place." "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" she asked hesitantly. "I know we cannot go back to what we had, but I miss having you in my life. I miss my best friend." The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on my own healing that I had not considered the possibility of Elaine returning to my life in any capacity. Part of me wanted to protect myself from further hurt. Another part recognized that she had been a victim of circumstances too, in her own way. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "Forgiveness is a process, not a single decision. I would need to know that you truly understand what happened and why your response was so harmful." "I want to understand better," she said earnestly. "I have been reading everything I can find about male sexual assault survivors, about trauma responses, about how to support someone who has been through what you have. I know it is not your job to educate me, but I am willing to do whatever work is necessary." We agreed to take things slowly. First occasional emails and texts, then coffee once a month. Eventually, we began seeing a therapist together, not with the goal of rekindling our romantic relationship, but to heal the wounds we had both sustained and inflicted. Through those therapy sessions, I learned that Elaine had her own trauma history that had influenced her reaction to my disclosure. She had grown up with a father who frequently used excuses and lies to cover his infidelities, which had made her hypervigilant about being deceived by men. Understanding her perspective did not erase the pain of her disbelief, but it helped me contextualize it. Today, 2 years after that first coffee shop meeting, Elaine and I have developed a new kind of relationship. We are not husband and wife anymore, but we have forged a friendship based on mutual respect and hard-won understanding. She has become an advocate in her own right, educating her colleagues in the healthcare field about the reality of male sexual assault. My work with survivors continues to be the center of my life. The nonprofit I joined after leaving the hospital has expanded its services specifically for male victims, and I now lead that program. I still facilitate support group meetings with Patrick, who has become a close friend and mentor. Each time a new member joins and shares his story, I am reminded of how far I have come from that night in Dr. Rayburn's office. Sometimes the truth takes time to emerge, but when it does, it gives us a chance to rebuild on a foundation stronger than before. Have you ever had to fight to be believed when telling your truth? How did you find the strength to stand up for what really happened when everyone doubted you? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more voices of survivors. Do not forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their struggle to be believed. Thank you for listening, and remember, your truth matters even when the world is not ready to hear it.